So my name is Debbie Mueller, and my job title as an artist is artist. And but my other job title is I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, and right now just working as a gynecologist. I took a new job about a year and a half ago that puts me working 3 days a week and not delivering babies anymore. So I work 3 full days in that position, and then the time that I'm not there, I'm working as an artist. And I started painting 6 years ago. And I have a bit of an unusual story in that. I think when you talk to people who are coming to a career in art at the age that I'm at, a lot of them will tell you, oh, I always did art. Art was always a part of my life. I always wanted to be a painter, but I had to put it on the back burner while I did other things. And that is not my story. My story was that I had no artistic ability, or so I thought. I had no interest really in art when I was growing up. I did music and drama. I always liked crafty things. I loved the act of creating. So I did pottery on and off. I did some mosaic. I took some photography classes. Always loved color, decorating, but never anything that required me to make a mark like with my hand. And 6 years ago, we were visiting my parents, and it was not a fun day. It was boring. It was raining out. Nobody knew what to do. People were just sitting around. And my mother had some paint, and she said, "Do you want to paint a painting?" And my first thought was to say no, because it just held no appeal to me. But I had nothing better to do. And so I said yes. And that's when my life changed. So the painting that I did was not a good painting. I just want to reinforce the idea that it isn't like there's this idea of innate natural talent for probably 99% of artists. But I loved the way that I felt while I was painting. It was meditative. It was, I don't want to say relaxing, because you're working, your brain is working very hard, but deeply focused. And the closest thing I could compare the experience to is actually when I do surgery, which is very much the same thing, where time goes by and you don't really have an idea of how long it's been. It's that flow state that people talk about. And even in that very first painting, I was sort of in that flow state. And I thought, wow, that was cool. So when I got back home from that trip, I thought, I think I'd like to do this some more. Knew nothing. I thought, well, if I want to create a lot of colors, I have to buy a lot of different colors of paint. I didn't know anything about mixing color. And so I bought a big 48 color set at Michael's and just started copying photographs. And I had a good friend and neighbor who was an artist, and I was able to sort of see how she was learning and approaching her career as a emerging artist. So I was able to kind of model a little bit of what I was doing, and I started taking some classes and then attending workshops, and bit by bit my abilities increased and my opportunities increased. And probably within a year of starting to paint, of creating that first painting, I knew that I wanted to be as good at painting as I possibly could, and continue with it, and become professional, whatever that means, sell my work and exhibit. So I think painting is very intimidating to people, and people don't like to do things that they're not good at. You know, there's just like, it's natural. You want to, if you're making something, you want to feel proud of it. And so, you know, if I had come home from that trip and thought, well, I'm not a natural artist, I'm not going to do this. Like, thank goodness at that point, I recognized that it was more about how I felt and less about what the output was, and continued to pursue it. But it didn't take a long time before I did some things that I felt proud of. And of course, now I look back on those and go, oh my God, they're awful. But, and I'll probably look back on what I do today and, 5 years and feel the same thing. But I think there are a few other things that are wonderful about it. The first is learning again, so I practiced medicine for 30 years, and I'm not saying I stopped learning, but there weren't a lot of new things to learn at that point. And so it was really exciting to be at a point where I had tons to learn from so many different people and in so many different ways, because you don't just have to learn. If you're going to be an artist, You don't just have to learn how to paint or draw or sculpt or do what you're creating, but you also have to essentially learn how to run a small business and how to market yourself and how to connect and take advantage of opportunities and network and do things that really were not in my wheelhouse as a physician. So I feel like my brain has grown, tremendously over these last 6 years. And that's fun. And it's just fun. If most 18-year-olds said to their parents, I want to be a painter, their parents would probably be having a conversation about like backup and contingency plans, And so, and again, I'm in a little bit of a different situation because I'm not a full-time artist and I'm not depending on my work as an artist to pay my bills right now, but I am making money. I think it'll be important, to share with people that at this point in my life, I'm, basically working 2 part-time jobs. So I'm very happy with the balance that I have right now. It would be natural for me to look at retiring somewhere in the next, I don't know, 5 to 8 years or something like that. And, I'm sure I will, but just from the medicine job, one of my kids asked me if I was ever going to stop painting and retire from being a painter. It's like, sorry, no, that's something I'll do till the day I die, because it becomes like breathing. You just sort of, you have to. But it, like I said, this has come at a good time, at a sort of natural time for me, in terms of my kids being independent, and on their own more now, and not needing me like they would have needed me when they were little. And like I said, the way that I've structured my medical job, there are 3 days where, that's what I'm doing. I typically don't get home until sometime between 6 and 8 o'clock at night. So I don't put a lot of pressure on myself to do anything else on those days, but work. And then I have 2 weekends a week. I have like one in the middle of the week and one at the end of the week. And then those are, by and large, dedicated to painting and doing other artist stuff. So I work for myself. I mean, there are artists who work for other people, they're really oftentimes termed illustrators, where you get an assignment and your job is to create art. Most of it is digital now, to be honest. But you're not doing your own thing. You're doing an assignment that someone's asked you to do, and oftentimes in the style. But most fine artists are working for themselves. So, yep, I have my own business. I started an LLC a few years ago. I have a tax ID number. And so that's my art business. Sure. I mean, I think you can probably divide it into painting, like creating, and then sort of a second category, which would be preparing artwork, so like this morning I did some varnishing of paintings to get them ready to frame, and then doing framing. So that also takes up time. And then there is, sort of secondary activities that support the business. So that could be things like delivering paintings to a gallery, or picking up prints that a printer has created for you, or delivering sometimes a painting to a client that's commissioned something, and taking care of that, or updating my website, or posting on social media, which has become, so important in terms of really marketing and sales and everything like that. So keeping my website up to date, keeping social media going, so I have, some sort of presence there, ordering paint and supplies and panels, preparing panels. So the panels that I really like painting on, I order sort of this very thin little panel, and then I like to adhere it to something thicker, and then I like to coat it with a coat of either acrylic paint or gesso, which is like a substrate, a surface. So sometimes it's just sort of getting your tools prepared. So most days there's sort of a little bit of everything. Like I said, I varnished first thing this morning. Then I painted the painting that you see behind me. This afternoon, I may make an application to a juried show. So that'll take some time online to submit artwork for a show. And then do some shipping. I've sold a few paintings, and so I have a few that I have to get in the mail. Art serves lots of different functions. I mean, there are people who make art that is disturbing and enlightening and political and fun and gory and, you know, like beautiful and ugly and monochromatic and colorful, and there's space for everybody. And so I think that, you know, one of the things that people need to think about, you know, as they move into their career is what are their goals? And what it's narrowed down to for me is essentially portraying light. Like that's the commonality of all my paintings, is that there's this really wonderful sense of illumination and light and shadow. I don't tend to go out and paint on gray days. It just doesn't, that doesn't jazz me the way that seeing the effects of light and shadow do. But for someone else, they will create beautiful, moody paintings on these overcast days. And so there are just so many options. I do think my work is largely fun, as I just spent a month doing a still life painting every day, and that's probably what you were looking at. And so those are fun, and I had fun with it. Like I painted a bagel and lox and sushi and Chinese food takeout cup and just things that people will relate to in their lives. But you know, there are people that are doing completely different work as well. So there are successful professional artists who have never taken a class on painting. They are completely self-taught. They've figured out their own way. They've made their own path. And then at the other extreme, you know, there are artists that have had a college degree in, you know, a BFA in fine art or painting and gone on to get a master's, and some even beyond that, although that's less common. And then there's training through, they call ateliers, which are really sort of apprenticeship art training schools, where oftentimes it's a very formal curriculum where the students may only draw for the first 2 years, not even use any color. The third year they may paint, but only in a monotone. And then the fourth year they start learning color. So that can be very regimented, and that, you know, there's some people that spend 4 to 6 years at an atelier learning how to paint in a certain style. For me, again, because I came to this later in life, I have taken advantage of learning opportunities, but it hasn't been, you know, through formal, you know, university settings or anything like that. I've taken a series of classes that are offered privately by other artists. You know, painting class, a landscape painting class. And then, and those are now available not only, you know, locally, people can usually find through their local art association or some other thing, they can oftentimes find good painting classes. But now, thank you to the pandemic, there are a few silver linings from it. The availability of online painting classes has absolutely exploded, and they are not second best. I've done a few. And because if the teacher has taken the time to do a good setup with their technology, you can sometimes see even more than you would see. So I've taken workshops where there were 20 students. I can't get any closer than 12 feet from the instructor. I can't necessarily hear him well. I certainly can't see the canvas and his palette at the same time to see how he's mixing color. And, you know, I'm hopeful to get, you know, just a little bit of opportunity to get close enough to see. Well, a lot of these artists now are doing these classes where they may have multiple cameras set up. So you're simultaneously seeing the subject they're painting, the painting that they're creating, and their palette to watch them be able to mix color all at the same time. So I think that, and those classes do tend to be reasonable. I mean, we're talking, you know, if you take a 6-week class or something, it might be for most like $200 or $300. So it's not like paying college tuition of thousands and thousands of dollars a year. So there really are a lot of opportunities. Workshops are another wonderful way to learn. That's a more immersive experience, often requiring traveling, and it tends to be like morning till night type of exposure, with a lot of one-on-one with the instructor, and those can be more expensive, certainly once you pay for your travel, your lodging, your meals, and the instructor's fee, sometimes you're paying $2,000-3,000 to have an experience like that. But I think some of my greatest leaps, sort of where you sort of move to that next step, have happened after workshops. So I do think that they're valuable. Well, the act of painting is certainly usually solitary. You can see I have my studio in my home, so my family is often around, but really I like being very focused when I'm painting. I don't really like, there are some people that can chat with other people while they paint, but my brain is so narrowed in on what I'm doing that I don't care for that. But there are opportunities to paint in groups. So I've done quite a bit of plein air, or plein air, depending on how you pronounce it. It's the French word Plein, and it means painting outside. And oftentimes some friends and I will go to a location and we will paint together. So we're not necessarily chatting the whole time that we're painting, but we're there together. I've been on some excursions where there are large groups of painters painting together, conventions and things like that, where lots of people are gathered in the same place and painting. And so there definitely can be a social element to it. But if you need that all the time, if you need to be interacting with other people all the time, painting may not be like so good for a person like that, because mostly it is on your own. But there is this relationship aspect. So if you're represented by a gallery, you have to have a relationship with the gallery manager and owner, and be able to work together to achieve your goals. And even just dealing with clients and commissions and things like that, there's a lot of contact that you have with other people about your art. I would say, because not only am I an artist, but I've become an art collector. That's what happens when you suddenly expose yourself to this world of wonderfully talented people. You're like, oh, I love that painting, I want to buy it. And I will tell you that I'm much more inclined to purchase a painting from somebody that I feel an emotional connection to than from somebody who may be a great painter, but I don't know them. I don't know anything about them. And so it serves a painter very well to have that like outgoing and friendly and connected kind of relationship with their clients. The first thing that comes to mind is that there are some painters who get so wound up in what they're making. Their very soul is embedded in the painting that they're creating. It is everything to them. And if something goes poorly, if they make a mistake, they're so hard on themselves. I've practiced medicine for 30 years. I've operated on people. I've delivered thousands of babies. And if a painting goes wrong, oh, well, it's just a painting. It's like, it's no big deal. I will just scrape it down and do something new on that. And so the perspective that I've gained as a physician has helped me be so much more resilient as an artist. So I would say that's probably been, what I've learned most. But I have a mentor who has taught lots and lots of adults, including lots of people like me, who are a little older in life. And he feels that people who are smart and have other skills tend to succeed as artists, because they, during their professional career, have applied themselves. They've been curious, they've learned, they've read, they've paid attention, they've sought out information. And so those skills and those practices definitely came into play for me as an art student. And so, I think probably what the drive and the talents or whatever that I had, as a, teenager and someone in my early 20s, that propelled me to a good college and then to a good medical school and then to a good residency program, that now is sort of still under me, although it's certainly not as stressful as getting into medical school, has propelled me to say, what else can I do with this? I'm really not satisfied to stay where I am in terms of my abilities. I'm always trying to push myself forward. Someday I'm going to just make like a little quick slideshow of like a painting every 3 months from the 6 months, like to be able to see the progression, because it's huge. I just really people need to know, like when I first started painting, I made horrible paintings. They were nothing to be proud of, but it's that like you keep going and you keep creating. There's an expression, they call it miles of canvas, like that's what it, like you have to keep doing things over and over again. You have to put in the time. I mean, it's like I said, I may not be painting for 8 hours a day, but I'm looking at photos for composition. I'm spending a lot of time. And so, and you have to love it and want it. I mean, if it's not something that you love doing, then you just shouldn't do it. It's I mean, besides just the the abilities as a painter, I think it's some of the things that I've already said, just a curiosity, a desire to keep learning. And I guess also this recognition that it goes beyond just having skills as a painter, that if you're going to be successful as an artist, you have to learn something about running a small business and marketing yourself, because unless you are very wealthy and can pay a publicist, nobody else is going to do it for you. And that was something I was very uncomfortable with. So a lot of people don't really realize this, but going back to when I first started practicing in medicine, it was actually considered unethical for physicians to advertise their services. The only place you would ever see a physician's practice or phone number listed was in the yellow pages, the old-fashioned phone book. And there would never be an ad in a newspaper or anything like that, except potentially when a new physician joined a practice, they might just make a very distinguished looking announcement. But there were no advertisements. And of course, that's very different now. But when I went to medical school and went through training, there was no training on how to promote yourself or do anything like that. And so that was a skill that I completely had to learn. And the hardest part was probably just getting comfortable with the idea of tooting my own horn, because that's just not who I am natively. That wasn't something that I would have ever done. So, but you have to, because like I said, no one else is going to do it. Yeah, so you really don't need a lot to get started in art. I mean, your biggest tool probably is your easel, and the one that I had first was called a French easel or a Julian easel. It's like this oh, what's the toy that connects all the different parts? I can't remember now, but it's this three-legged thing that folds up like a suitcase. And then when you open it up, it's an easel with a little drawer. Anyway, I found one on Craigslist for $60. So certainly not a big investment there. You need something to paint on. And my first things that I did, I went to Michael's and I bought the 10 pack of stretched canvas. It's not good quality. And so you're probably better off buying something a little nicer, but it's certainly fine to get started. You need some paint and you need some brushes. Now I'm an oil painter, but I wasn't originally. I started with acrylics. Acrylics have the advantage of cleaning up with water, of being readily available and drying quickly. And so that's a plus, because they're dry within about 5 minutes. And so if you want to change something, you can go back over a place that you've just painted on within a very short period of time. What I didn't like about them was that in some cases they're made of plastic. And so they looked to me in certain cases a little plasticky. But the biggest thing was that they actually dry a little bit darker than when they first get put on. And so it was very difficult to judge the value, the light and darkness of a painting. If I was trying to match a color, I had to actually mix it a little bit lighter than what it looked like on the canvas and then put it on. So with oil paint, you need your paint. But you also, oftentimes people will use a little bit of a solvent like odorless mineral spirits to thin their paint. And some people use mediums, and then you need brushes. And actually that's what I think needs to be good, because working with crappy brushes is really frustrating. And so you don't have to pay a lot. Like the really wonderful brushes that I use are maybe $5 or $6 a piece, but they're not $1, so paying a little bit more for that is good. And so that's really it. Like you can see behind me, I've got this, move out of the way. So I have a table, a little table that I got from Target. It's got a piece of glass that covers the surface, and then my palette and my paintbrushes on it. You see it. And then this is a fancy easel. You don't need a fancy easel straight off, but you need an easel and you need a good light. And that's it. When I paint outdoors, and I do that a lot, I have a special plein air easel that attaches to a camera tripod. And everything is self-contained in a backpack. So I oftentimes will hike into a location to paint, and I like having my hands free in case it's a difficult hike. And then everything is in my backpack to set up, and I can paint outdoors. I mean, this is probably good to raise too, because there's two ways to paint, or three really. I mean, you can paint from your imagination, you can paint from a photograph, and you can paint from life. And painting from life is just, there's so much more accurate information about color and light that you'll get, so this still life painting behind me of the lemons, there they are, there's the lemons with a nice light source, and I'm looking at what I'm painting. When you paint plein air, you're doing the same thing, but one of the challenges is that everything changes. So with this thing, it's not going to change over 3 or 4 hours if I'm painting. But when you paint outdoors, the sun moves in the sky, the shape of the shadows changes, clouds come in, clouds go out, the wind picks up, there are reflections on the water, then it's choppy and the reflections go away. So what you're painting can change, minute by minute. So that's very, very challenging, but still really wonderful and essential. And it kind of bonds you with the location that you're in when you paint. You almost feel a sense of ownership and connection to a place after you've painted it. Yes. So plein air convention, plein air competitions, workshops. But the other way to flip it is that when I travel, I paint. So even when I travel with my family for vacations, I love bringing my easel along and painting the places that we visit. And it's just, those are also wonderful memories. So I think the first separation that I would make in terms of types of paintings, types of artwork, would be abstract versus representational. And, abstract art, I find it very difficult. I sort of tried a couple, and it's not for me, but it has, very broad appeal. People love having abstract work in their homes and on their wall. And so I think people who do abstract art tend to do very well. And I'm not saying people don't sell their paintings. There are commissioned portrait artists who earn, huge amounts for their work. Obviously, they've achieved a certain level of skill, but there are sort of brokers that people can go to and then sort of shop for different artist styles. But, there are artists that get, 30, 40, 50,000 and more for a commission. Obviously most people don't, sort of start out there. So I think, one of the things I've also learned is you really have to have a little bit of a thick skin. There are people who will look at my work and just, like just not, it's not them. It doesn't move them. And so my work tends to be a little more graphic, a little more, maybe a little impressionistic. It's not highly representative, like it's not photorealistic in that. And sometimes people prefer something that's, that's different. When I've been in plein air competitions, you often have to stand in front of your paintings while people walk by and sort of shop. And it's just, I hate it because, for every person that stops by and goes, oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. Someone else will just like kind of roll their eyes or just not even really look. And you're like, all right, whatever. So the reality is you can't be, no, everyone will never like everything that you do. Like you're not marketing to everybody. You're marketing to your person. And the problem is it's hard to know that. So there are people that will like your stuff and you just have to find who that tribe is. For some people, it's a little easier. Some people do like pet portraits. And so, oh my gosh, pet lovers, like they're easy to find. There are Facebook groups and Instagram pages, and it's pretty easy to do that. I don't really have a clear sense that there's like this one tribe of people that like my work, but eventually, there are enough people that are finding it and enjoying it and collecting it. So I'm fine. I'm happy. So I think that if you look at someone who considers them a professional artist, that you will find many, many people whose income does not derive solely from the sale of paintings. Now, that may be somebody like me who has a part-time or a full-time job, and doesn't rely really on their artwork at all in terms of their livelihood. Or it may be someone who is a full-time artist, but for them, they may be getting income from teaching. There are a lot of artists who teach. Teaching can be a really reliable income stream. I sometimes go a couple months and I don't sell a painting, and you're like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to sell anything again? And then you sell 3 in 2 days. So with teaching, if you have a consistent gig, that some of that money, is going to be coming in. So teaching becomes a really big thing for a lot of artists. And then a lot of artists will work, say, in a gallery or in a framing store, or do something that's sort of art related, or work at a museum and do something that's art related, but again, not for their painting practice. There certainly are artists who are making a living doing full-time art. And their quality or quality of life, but their standard of living, their expenses, it's going to vary hugely. There might be artists who feel that they are successful, who are earning $30,000 or $40,000 a year and feeling like, well, that's pretty good. And I can make a go of that. And then, there are artists, there's lots of artists that earn 6-figure salaries and even higher. So, but that's really, the higher is going to be a very, very tiny percentage of people who are selling their paintings at just, the highest level. I mean, there are paintings that sell for over $100,000, but for most people, it's it's sort of I guess I would say a middle class, existence. You're not going to be, it's unlikely that someone would be terribly wealthy, but if you work hard and you're creative about income, you could definitely make a go of it. Yeah. So I think a lot of people think that artists are really like flighty and like emotional and unstable. And, there's that like starving artist or crazy artist, whatever, eccentric artist. And, most people are just sort of normal people and they're creating their art. So I think sometimes when you show up in a professional way and you have your act together and you're organized, sometimes people are actually a little surprised, like, oh, well, you sent me a spreadsheet, like, wow, that was amazing. So, I think that that's a good thing. I think the other thing it's a plus and a minus. So if I'm out painting in an area where there are other people, people love to come up to you and talk. And, sometimes that's fine. But, if you're doing let's call it a quick draw. Sometimes there are competitions that you literally have 2 hours to do a painting. You don't really feel like you can spend a lot of time chatting someone up. And people come over, oh, my Aunt Susie was a painter. Like, everybody wants to talk to painters. So it can be wonderful. It can be a great way to interact with people. I have literally sold a painting off the easel like a couple of times when I was outside painting and someone just came over and said, I have to have that. But if you don't like interacting with, there are things people can do to try to avoid it. Like, some people will wear headphones or just not paint in areas where there are other people. But I guess that's what I would say. Painting. Like, I love painting. And so I get to do what I love. What's that expression? Like, if you work doing something you love, you'll not, what is it? If your job is something that you love, you'll never work another day in your life, or something like that. And so, I'm doing something. I'm not saying there aren't moments that I have frustrations or irritations with something that's going on, but in general, it's joyful. I love what I do. And so that's really the biggest benefit. Yeah, I think especially if you're looking at sales, it is inconsistent. In general, like, obviously paintings can be at very different price points. When I first started selling paintings, my smaller paintings that I did, I got $40 for a painting that I did for somebody, and that felt great, and now, some of my largest paintings cost thousands of dollars. So, you know, if you are somebody who is relying on this for an income, in general, paintings are luxury items. And so the luxury markets fluctuate with the economy. So there were a lot of art galleries and a lot of painters in 2008 when the economy crashed and people, lost a lot of their wealth that was tied up in the stock market. There were a lot of people who really struggled, whose art sales like fell precipitously. And so you have to be nimble. You have to be able to, to pivot. The pandemic, interestingly, has been good for art sales in general. Not every gallery has done well. I think the galleries that have strong social media presence and email marketing and things like that were able to maintain their sales. Galleries that just relied on street traffic, maybe not so much. But people who sell their art like through social media and that sort of thing, like me, people theorize that a lot of people sort of were staying home. And so they were looking at their walls and saying, what would I like to look at, and buying art. But there really are a lot of external factors. You're not in control of your income. And I'm tend to be a pretty risk averse person, which is why I feel happy to not rely on my painting sales for paying my bills. I know that I'm going to get a paycheck from my other job. And when I sell a painting, I'm delighted. And at this point, I have taken the money that I've derived from painting and turned it back into either improvements for my studio or my own education as a painter. And that's what funds that. But it is not reliable. And so that is probably, if you are a full-time artist or, depending on art for your livelihood, that's probably the biggest downside. I don't think so. I can't say that there's been anything that like bit me, like something, oh, I wish I had known that, you learn as you go. That's for sure. I was commissioned to do a painting, and I sent the person the image of the painting that I had done for them. And they said, oh, could you make the colors brighter? And like that wasn't a good thing. And I did make them brighter, and I didn't feel good about it. And she wrote back, she's like, never mind, I don't want it. I was like, oh my gosh. So, it was not a big painting. It wasn't a lot of time. It wasn't a lot of money, lessons learned. Now I ask for upfront partial payment for commission, like, so there are things you learn along the way just in terms of business practices. But no, I don't think there's been any big gaps or anything like that. Because my studio's at home, it's not exactly like going to work. I think if I had a studio outside of my home, it would be very different. I don't think I would paint as much. For me, I can go, I can get up after dinner, and even if I'm kind of tired, I can say, oh, I see some changes I want to make in that painting, and I can maybe spend an hour just noodling with it. Whereas if I had to get in my car and go somewhere else, that would be difficult. So even though it's work, it's work at home. So, and I can stop and throw in a load of laundry or, whatever. I do think it gets a little challenging. Like, I love painting so much that if it was up to me, maybe I would spend all weekend just painting. And again, with the pandemic, I live in New Hampshire. It's not like there's a lot of places that we feel like we can go that are safe, that you could be like indoors, and it's cold. So there's not a lot of outdoor stuff that we're comfortable doing right now. So it's not like there's a whole lot of alternatives, but I do feel that tug sometimes with my family, with my husband, where they'll be like, what are you doing? Oh, you're painting again? Like, yeah. So. Well, if I don't paint for a day or two, I'm just totally off. Like, I have to. It's like breathing. I have to be painting. And if that's the way somebody also feels, then this is what they should do. But if you're not driven in that way, if you don't need it like oxygen, then there's probably much easier ways to earn a living that are, and you can do a little painting here and there as a hobby. So I think that's maybe the difference. So what I said before, doing something that you love. My career in medicine up until a year and a half ago had become increasingly stressful over probably the last 5 years or so. A lot of external things, and it was sort of a little bit at a time, but I sort of woke up one day and realized, like, I wasn't sleeping well the night before I was on call. I was much more anxious. I was having some health problems. And I just sort of said, I need to make a change. And so I think having that awareness that um, that your career, what you're doing as your job shouldn't be harming you, shouldn't be hurting you. Um, but what I have now, because I don't have the stress of delivering babies, I'm actually really enjoying my work as a physician again, and find it highly, highly rewarding and fulfilling. And so I do sort of have this perfect balance right now. I guess I would just say to be kind of listening for that voice. I guess just that find your tribe. Like, we talked about painting being somewhat solitary, but one of the biggest gifts of being a painter has been meeting other painters and making some absolutely wonderful, wonderful friends. And we support each other and we help each other, and we sometimes I'll send a painting to a friend and I'll say, something's not working with this and I can't figure out what it is, so that just becomes very important. So, join up, find your tribe, make connections with other people, find mentors, it's a really generous community, and and then find a way to give back, I would say too. So.